This is Launch One with Mason Springer. I'm Mason Springer, and it is ASA week. So, first ASA of the year. This is Foley, Alabama, one of the most exciting events when it comes to 3D. People are always looking forward. They've been cooped up in the house all winter, just breaking out the bows and getting on the range. It is super exciting, and I'm not able to attend Foley this year, but I'm here with Annabelle Moore, and she has been getting ready for Foley, and I'm looking forward to learning a little bit about the competition and how you prep for it. So, Annabelle, we'll start with where are you from in the country?
Well, currently I live in Waco, Texas, where I'm attending McLennan Community College as an engineering major. And so, yeah, I'm from Waco right now.
Okay, nice. So, what's the weather like down there? How's shooting outside this time of year?
Well, it's just starting to get really nice. We had that ice storm run through Texas and most of the South. About a week ago, it started to warm back up, and now it's really nice shooting outside. I wish it'd like that all summer, but I
Yeah,
know that's not going to happen.
yeah, absolutely. I know up north here in Ohio, we're still, I mean, there's snow on the ground when I look out the window, so it's still pretty cold. Not quite outdoor shooting material yet. That's one thing that kind of holds me back from starting 3D
Yeah.
early like you. At Foley, what class do you shoot?
I shoot the women's known pro class at Foley. I moved into the class last spring.
Okay, I guess that would be considered like a rookie, right? First
Yes.
season in the women's nose, and now this is going into your second season,
Yes, that's
right?
correct.
So how many essays do you normally go to every year?
Well, last year I went to almost all of them except London, unfortunately. That was canceled. I wouldn't say I have a regular. I went to 3 of the ASAs a couple years back when I shot in the youth class, and I went to one 2 years later. So this is going to be my second year regularly attending the ASAs.
Nice. Yeah, and I looked back through some of the ASA records, and I saw that you've done pretty good at some of them. What are some of your, I guess, best moments, favorite moments at some of these ASAs?
Well, there's been a couple shots on the range, but I think definitely Metropolis absolute highlight for me. Just I really was like, "Oh my god, I'm doing this." I wanted to make that shot and I did. As the bedded buck's usually one of my favorites. It has great markings on it for the lower 12, but the sun was shining in a way that the shadow like pointed straight to the 14. I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is my shot right here." And I did it. I really the shot went off before I knew what was happening. I think that's definitely a moment for me. I still look back at that. I'm like, "Oh my goodness, that was so amazing."
Yeah, and I've seen your name on some of the leaderboards too. I know have you been in some shoot downs, right?
Yes, I made 3 last year.
Yeah, that's great. We're gonna have to talk about that. Yeah, ASA shoot down, that's high pressure. And for anybody listening, I've heard people refer to or compare an ASA, like win in an ASA pro class to like winning a major in golf. So it is, I mean, it's a big tournament. There's a lot of shooters. How many shooters are there at an ASA?
I'm really not sure. I know there's hundreds. I know there's usually around maybe 40 in the women's known pro class.
And then I know there's a couple thousand at least, that come in total, and
Yeah.
then lots of spectators too. But
Mhm.
it's a pretty bustling event. I went to my first national ASA last summer, and it's a different experience. It's pretty new. So as far as you said, Metropolis last year shooting a bedded buck. So I was there at that tournament. We got rained out. It's kind of cut a little bit short. How was that weekend for you?
Well, I would say day 1 was all right, but not quite how I wanted it to go. I felt like I put some in there on a lot of the closer shots, but I remember that day's average being like 47 yards or something like that. And so there was a lot of tough shots the whole day. And I think I was sitting in fifth at the end of there with like 12 up. I was like, all right, let's do this. And then the first half of day 2 was rough. I was, trying my best to make good shots, but a lot of them were just out or I was just away from the 12. It was getting really frustrating, and around the halfway point when we were starting to, worry about the weather, I
Hmm.
started getting my groove back. And I remember on the last shot, we had this mid 40-yard Russian boar, and I finally put one in the 12 and I was like, yes, let's do this. And then we canceled and we had to run. Grayson and I were running towards my truck and we got out of the rain. And unfortunately, day 2 was canceled. But that did end up bringing me to the shoot off. I don't know if I would have made it regardless, but that was really a blessing for me, and it was great to do that with my dad as well.
Yeah, that's great. I know, the rain, it definitely hurts some people and it helps some people. And it's good to hear that it
Yes.
helped you out. I know that it started raining like probably halfway through my second round. I might have been on the same range as you guys now that I think about it. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was kind of a bummer. But that's outdoor for you. Stuff
Hmm.
like that's just gonna happen. So, now I've seen, I think is it your profile picture on Instagram, Facebook is you with the headset on in the cam
Yes.
booth. That's got to be after an ASA, and that's a win, right?
That was after Metropolis. I was beside myself, and then all I could talk about was work. Really, I was just like, I was so mind blown. I was like defaulted like work, work. It was great, and my dad's like, Annabelle, we need to work on your talking skills here. But I was still like, it wasn't until like maybe 10 minutes later I was like, this happened.
Yeah, I mean they
It
throw
went
that
so fast.
headset on. Do they throw that headset on like right after the win? Like what's the delay there?
Yeah, you walk off that little patch of grass and they're like, get over here now, now, now.
Oh, okay.
And like, all right, we're here with Annabelle Moore. And I'm like, oh, I did not prepare for this.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's fun though. That's a fun experience. That's kind of what
It
we do it
was.
for.
It's really encouraged me and just kept putting more fuel to that fire. I'm like, I really enjoy ASA. I love the creativity with your shots, your options, and that just reinforced it even more.
Absolutely, yeah. So that being said, this time of year, it's prepping for ASA, so I'm sure that that kind of helps fuel the prep a little bit. When did you start shooting again this season?
Well, last November, I did shoot a 3D shoot. I went to Foley again for US Archery's Collegiate 3D Nationals, and I shot another 3D shoot at my local club at Waco Bowman. That was around the same time. Other than that, I haven't been doing any like local turn. I went to a tournament last weekend in Belton and shot the 30 target ASA qualifier. It really is about 4 weeks ago. I was like, right after Lancaster, I was like, all right, indoors over. We're doing this. It's so right after Lancaster is when I dedicated my whole bow setup, changed rests and everything. Before then, I was flopping back and forth.
Yeah, okay. And what's your indoor season look like?
Well, this kind of Lancaster. I was like, well, if I do really well at Lancaster, I can justify Vegas. Otherwise, not really this year. And indoor nationals, I'd really like to go to. But since I'm kind of starting to fund myself now as a college student, I really have to pick and choose what I want to focus on, and that's ASA for me, 3D.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that makes good sense. So, when you're transferring your bow from indoor to 3D, and this is something that I've yet to do, what does that transfer look like? Are you messing with the tune? Are you just throwing on a different sight? Like what's that look like for you?
Well, I will say last year I did just throw some other stuff on there. For most of the 3D season, I shot one bow, but for Foley, I shot a different one. So right after that, I switched my indoor bow immediately over and I shot that the rest of the season. This year, I did a blueprint on my indoor setup so I could come back to it next fall, and I lengthened my draw length a little bit. This indoor season, I had a really high holding weight with a lower poundage and a lot of weight on my bars. So I had to pull really hard into my shot, and I did like that. But with 3D, I'm still looking and observing my target even when you're at full draw. So I really don't want to have to be struggling and pulling into a shot when I don't even know if am I going to let down and relook at this or what? Because on a target like a three spot or a FITA, it's like you only have one place to go, so you might as well pull straight into it. But I like to be a bit more in control of what I'm doing with 3D. So I have a longer draw length and a slightly lighter poundage, so I'm pulling about 53 pounds. And I did actually keep the same, I still have a heavier weight setup, so it's a little different from last year.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I think that I can agree with you there. For indoor, I like a little bit more of a, I don't know if an aggressive shot was the right word for it. And then 3D, I guess you're aiming a little bit more and having a more in control shot. I think is the term you used is can be better in some cases.
Yeah.
So what does that change look like on your stabilizer weight? You said more weight, was it?
I did end up keeping my indoor weight the same actually. So I made my poundage a little lighter, but not a whole lot this year. I just let out the draw length a little more. And I've got about an even slightly heavier on the back, but mostly even weight setup with a long back bar and really long front bar.
Really? Okay. How many inches?
I have a 33-inch front bar and a 15-inch back bar.
Wow. Yeah, and what's
Actually,
your draw length?
draw length's around 27 and 3/4
Okay.
for 27 3/4 to 28 inches.
Yeah, I know a lot of people try to equate stabilizer length with draw length.
Unfortunately, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I kind of like my stabilizers probably shorter than a lot of people. I'm about the same draw length as you, maybe a half inch longer, and I'm running like a 27-inch bar.
Yeah,
So a lot shorter. I think it's kind of a preference thing. It changes the hold a little bit, and I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but um,
yeah.
I think something to play with. How do you like the balance on your bow?
For this indoor season, I kind of had the more a front heavy leaning setup, so that justified the poundage and me pulling into the shot. But I lengthened my back bar a whole lot, so it's heavy, but it's closer to a balanced setup now. And for my indoor, I actually had a 27-inch front bar and a 15 back bar. But for my 3D setup, I have a 33-inch front bar and a 12 with the 4-inch extension on it on the back.
Okay. Yeah. So what do those long bars do for your pin movement exactly?
Well, I think the original thing in my mind about having longer bars was to have a little less weight on there because last year I had the indoor setup and I just ran with it. And I guess I had a good enough experience with it. I wanted to try that again this year, even though I'm shooting a different bow. And so it also allowed me to keep the same indoor weight while having more weight, feeling like there's more weight on the bars because I lengthened it out. And I also lifted my back bar up a whole lot. So my indoor had a more front heavy setup. My back bar was low, and now I've moved it up and it's almost in line with my front bar.
Okay. And how or which bow are you shooting?
I'm shooting the Hoyt Concept X.
Okay, 37?
Yes.
Yes, that's the bow I'm shooting right now. I picked that thing up and like it was kind of instant good results for me.
Yeah. That bow will shoot in the middle if you put it in there.
Yeah, how are you running like I know some people like to mess with tiller tune and throwing their timing off a little bit, knock height. How are you on that? Mostly center or do you like to throw it off a little bit?
I throw it off a little bit, will twist tune, so I will twist my D loop up and down along the string to see if I want that bow to pull up or down a little more depending on my weight setup. I will tiller tune. Right now I'm running, I have more twists in the bottom limb than the top. So that helps with the heavier weight setup as well. And I do mess with my strings a lot, whether it's just micro draw length adjustments and stuff, because I'm running the CDM mods instead of the spec mods
Okay.
and just other
What's
stuff like that. So yeah, I totally mess with everything I can.
what's your thoughts behind the CDM mods?
Well, I've always favored a like softer cam with the Altus. I had the DCX cams and that was like, I wasn't pulling much at all really. So I chose the CDM mods because I heard they were slightly, softer. I haven't shot the spec mods on my bow, so I couldn't give you a good comparison, but I think it helps because I have the soft draw stop on there too. So it mimics the old bow a little bit, gives me that comfortable feel. So it made the transition into the Concept X a lot easier.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know I kind of did the same things transitioning from my old bow to the new bow. Uh, I was shooting a PSE and switching to the Hoyt, like switching the brands. I was honestly a little bit um, weary of how that would turn out. But I
Yeah.
I did kind of like what you're saying, and it seemed to work well for me.
hmm
So you said stabilizer angles. You change the angles of your bars. What does that do for your hold, or what's
Well,
what's your
changing
process there?
Changing the angle of your back bar changes the amount of influence the weight has on the rest of your bow. So the lower it is, like the less influence it has. Whereas if you're holding, like say you're holding a 10-pound weight, 6 inches off your side, and then you're doing a lateral raise, that weight tires you out a lot faster. And that's kind of the method behind changing my back bar angle. Is if I want my bow to not pull down less, I might move it up, and that gives that back bar weight more influence, and I don't have to change the weights immediately.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. So, where's a good starting point? Like if I'm trying to set up a new bow and I want to, start from the beginning, get a new stabilizer set up. What's like a good starting point on angles, weight ratios? What's your thoughts on that?
I think most people usually start with a balanced setup, so a little heavier weight on the back and on the front. And I would start out definitely, if in freestyle anyways, with the 30-inch and 12-inch bar. And I don't know the exact angle degree, unfortunately, but I would have it a little low and just a little out. You want to start with out so you have that counterbalance to start learning how to hold the tilt of your bow and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, a little low and out usually helps to start out with. So you have a little counterbalance, and it's not a full parallel between your front and back bar, but it still has plenty of influence. And as I'm shooting, I tend to move mine closer to the bow, weirdly enough. So there's less counterbalance because I usually would tilt it to the, wait. Yeah, I'd usually tilt it to the left more, so if anything, I probably just needed a bar on the right-hand side of my bow, if anything. So I don't like a lot of left influence on mine.
Okay. Do you think that has anything to do with your grip?
Yeah, probably so.
Okay. Is it typical grip, a little bit atypical?
Well, I've struggled with my grip for a couple years. My arm is proof of that. But I've recently gotten a whole lot better. This past indoor season, I dedicated a lot of time to relearning how to grip my bow, so I don't have to worry about arm guards anymore. So I follow George Riles style because this is where I heard it from. You have your hand flat with the bow, you put it in the top of your grip, you bring the heel of your hand down, and then you rest your hand down. Maybe put your index finger on the front of the riser while you're drawing so you'd have less wobble. But the point is to have as little contact with the bow as possible, but it's at a spot where you can't or torque your bow as much.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a good neutral way to do it, and that definitely can affect your bow. I know if you look at guys like Matthias or, they've got tons of weight on that sidebar, and I see it like way out to the side. And even, some of like George Riles and some of his students, like they have a lot of weight and it's far out to the side. And I've tried it and I've never been able to do it. But I think the concept behind that is adding a little bit of torque in the bow, like purposeful torque. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it gives more influence to one side so you don't have to worry about left-right wobble. With my bow and my back bar being almost in line with my front bar, I have to worry about left and right canting. But with a back bar like way out to the left or right if you're left-handed, you only have to worry about pushing that bow one way. So that can make things a little more consistent, especially in.
Okay, yeah. So how do you set up your bars for the wind? Do you run any different weight, like if it's extra windy out, or do you just keep it solid and don't change anything?
I keep it solid and I don't change anything. I'll pull harder into that shot and I'll try to, just be prepared and try to make sure that shot goes smoothly so you're not holding any extra amount of time. But no, I don't change my setup specifically for the wind.
Okay, and how about your shot process? Does that change when your pin is blowing from one end of the target to the other?
Yeah, I'd say I'm definitely a lot more active mentally in the wind. Historically, I've always had a really light setup, so anything in the wind, I've always been out of it, especially in target and 50-meter tournaments. But no, I think it's more of I just end up having to pull a whole lot harder than I really feel like I should to keep it in the middle. And I'll camp my bow rather than aim off.
Okay. Yeah. So what does your mental process sound like? Sounds like you like to pull. What else is there like your shot process?
Well, my shot process, I usually, in my mind, I go through steps, especially when I can be distracted and I really need to regroup my mind. So I'll go through load, knock, grip. Because after I've knocked and I flicked my release, then I actually set my grip. Set up, down. So that's that motion when you're drawing your bow, and I have it high. So it's just a word cue that really helps instead of having extra words. And then it's anchor, target, and then I'm like just follow through.
Okay, big.
Just about a word every second that's in some way indicating what I'm doing at that moment, and I can follow that. And by following that in my mind, it helps me not think about distracting thoughts.
Okay. Yeah. So where do you have a coach that taught you this? Have you read books? Like where do you learn what you know?
Well, I have read With Winning in Mind by Larry Bassam. It was a couple years ago, but really my coach is my dad. He really brought me into the sport, and we've learned together about everything we know now.
Yeah, okay. I read With Winning in Mind as well, and I think that kind of sparked my real interest in the mental game. I've always I'm kind of the same shoes as you, I guess. My dad had always been my coach from when I started, and he taught me some good fundamentals. And then I think that, I got that book. It might have been recommended to me by Brady. Yeah, Brady Ellison, I think, recommended that book. So I went over to the Lancaster trailer and I bought it. It might have been at Lancaster, actually. And on the way home, I read it. I'm like, oh, it's all coming together now. Like, this is starting to make
Yeah.
sense.
Especially when you're just getting into competition and you're at a point where I need to do something else to get better. I think that book's a great point once you really get serious into competition archery and really anything. I think the great thing about that book is if you really take what it's telling you to heart, you can apply it to almost anything in life.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. I mean, I feel like, New Year's Eve, we always go to a friend's house and they have a dartboard. I'm a competitive type of person. And so, I'll challenge somebody to a game of darts and we'll play darts. And I think that just reading that book has made me better at darts, even though the book has nothing to do with darts. I can just get up there and follow a process, and I tend to win a little bit more than I lose,
Yeah.
which is good. But yeah, I think you're exactly on point there with being able to apply it to lots of different places in life. So your shot process is very important. We talked about stab weight, your bow setup. What about your arrows for 3D? What's your game there?
I shoot the Easton Superdrive 25s, and I have about 125 grains on the point. I stick with a 4 fletch. I'm using the Boning X3s right now, and biter knocks. And I really like that arrow. I've been fortunate enough to be able to shoot 25s. It wasn't something till later in the ASA season last year I realized that a lot of people might actually have issues with shooting those because they're a bigger diameter arrow in outdoor settings. But I like them especially with how big they are. They're super light and super fast. And I've had that 2 dozen arrows since last year, and I rarely have any issues with them. I mean, even with the Easton kickout bushings, I haven't completely destroyed any arrows. I've usually been able, if I clip the bushing and a little bit of the carbon and it's not ruined, I can usually super glue that little end there and that arrow will fly.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I've never let me think back. I don't think that I've ever shot anything bigger than a standard diameter arrow for 3D, believe it or not, which I guess I'm kind of crazy for it. I think I'm going to get some 23s, 25s. You shoot 25s. What do you recommend, or what made you choose a 25 over 23 or 27?
Well, me and my dad, when we started last year, he's like, Annabelle, you're not shooting 27s. I don't pull enough. And I'm not sure about draw because I do have a longer draw length, but definitely not enough poundage to get those 27s tuned right. And my dad had bought, it was a couple months earlier, and I tested him out and I was shooting great with him. And he's like, fine. And I immediately moved to those because, like, well, if we're really doing 3D, you want to have the bigger arrows so that way you can catch more rings. So I just, once I realized, oh, these tune really well, I'm not having any issues with these, I stuck with them, and I've really been happy with them ever since.
Yeah, that's good to know. What spine do your 25s come in? Do you know?
I think it's a 320,
Okay. Yeah, that's
maybe.
that's
I saw
manageable.
the case earlier, but yeah, I think that,
Yeah, that's manageable. Yeah, I know 27s, they can get to be pretty stiff.
yeah.
I've never thought of or shot a 27 outside. And, the national ASAs, I guess wind on a lot of the ranges that I've seen isn't a huge issue. Of course, you have a lot more experience with that than me. What's your thoughts there?
I'd say you're pretty on the point with that one. Other than your shoot offs, your outdoor shoot offs, which are in open spaces, you usually don't have a lot of issues with it. Of course, a place like Foley, you might have issues shooting in the wind because, in my experience shooting there last year, it was very open, a lot of short, waist height shrubbery. So you're definitely going to catch a breeze if there is one there. But yes, otherwise, you're usually protected well by trees.
Okay. And for Foley, what do you do to practice in the wind? And you said you like to cant your bow, right?
Yes.
How do you practice how much to cant, and how do you practice controlling the bow? Like that type of stuff for me was I started kind of honing in on my wind shooting last summer, and it was kind of like, okay, I know kind of what I need to do. I just don't know how to get there. Like what's your process for wind shooting?
Well, I would say I usually shoot for ASA practice around 45 yards because that's usually the average of distance we shoot in ASA tournaments in my class. And when I'm shooting in the wind out there at our field range in Waco, I will have practice on small targets. How much do I need to cant? And it's usually depending on how much wind. The more wind, the more I'll cant into it. And I just trial and error, and you learn, okay, we're just going to nudge it a little bit. Okay, let's full on bubble it over completely. And it just takes practice, and I bet it's probably different for a lot of archers, depending on your setup and how much speed you have on your bow and what arrows you're shooting, because that can make a big difference on how much you need to cant, and also depending on how much wind you have.
Okay, so what does arrow diameter? Have you seen a difference in arrow diameter between like 12s and 23s, or are you talking more like standard diameter to 12s? Are you seeing difference?
What I'm talking about right now is like 12s and 23s. For like your standard like X10 Pro Tours and stuff, I don't usually aim off a whole lot. I pull into the bow more because I'm confident that most of the time my arrows don't get pushed over that much if I can just keep my pin in the middle.
Okay, and is that for 3D? Have you
That's
shot
for target.
target?
But
Okay.
for 3D, I would definitely camp my bow a little bit depending on how much wind there is. And it's something you have to practice and you have to figure out to be prepared for those situations.
Okay. Do you have a good place at home where you can practice in the wind?
Yes, I do. At the Waco Bowman Archery Club, we have a static range that's out in the open, and then we have our field ranges, which are well in the trees. So you get to practice in a lot of different settings, whether it's incline, flat shots, the whole mix of it.
Okay, and incline, you brought up a good point there. How do you practice incline shots? Like, what's your process there? Changes in form, anything like that?
No, I draw to the target, I put it on there, and I follow my process. I think definitely, especially if you're preparing for a shoot with a lot of incline shots, I'd definitely check your axes because that's going to be a big deal. And then you're just going to want to get as much practice, learn how to cant into side hills. And I know there is a method where some people will lean up to the hill and then draw, and so their body is like kind of parallel with the target. But I mean, I've tried it, but I really usually prefer just to do what I feel is best. And I just shoot. I just
Yeah.
kind of mindless, but that's just what I do.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I've tried a couple different ways to do it. So I'm a tack shooter. I've shot a lot of tack shoots in the past, and there's a ton of angled shots there. I mean, the practice range is at an angle like this. So, I'm kind of used to shooting those angled shots, and I've done a couple different ways. Kind of the just shoot your bow way does surprisingly work good. In a lot of ways, like just kind of mindlessly doing things doesn't work, but in this case, it kind of has. And then another way that I've done it, and I'll explain to you how I do it. So I'll draw like the target is at eye level, and then I'll bend at my hips up or down until I get on the target. That seems to be the most consistent when it comes to draw length. I'm like making sure that that stays the same and like keeping your pressure on the back
Yeah.
wall. But the only negative is you're back there for longer too. By the time you draw down here and then try to raise it up or down. So there's a couple different ways to do it, I think.
Yeah. And definitely for a lot of incline shots, especially for a lot of downhill, I definitely shorten your draw length a little bit. Because when you're shooting those like uphill shots, your draw length feels so long. and you definitely want to tighten up on that so you don't have a crazy long hold where you're just bobbing up and down off of the dot.
Yeah. Okay. So I know ASA nationals, they try to make them as flat as they can. Are there any nationals that can get a little bit of incline?
They can have a little bit. I know at Foley we have a slight side hill on our range last year we did, and we had one side had a like slight downhill and slight uphill. Not a whole lot, but enough that you do can't to be sure. Just can't into the target and then level. And at Coleman, I remember there were a few downhill up, like solid downhill and uphill shots.
Okay. And what sets Fully apart from the rest of the ASAs? I know, I think it's London that is known for being really dark, like dark tunnels. What sets apart Fully?
I really think for Foley, I think it's because, or at least in my class, we shoot in a lot more open environment. It's really bright and you can see everything. You can almost see all the way down the range. Whereas at London, you can see everyone, but you're not going to see any of the targets till you get to them. And I think that'd be the biggest thing for me is that Foley is really open and you're much more likely to catch a breeze there.
Okay. And being able to see your targets more, does that correlate to more 12s, higher scores being shot, or does it stay about the same?
I think so. I think having a clear target's really good. It can be difficult when you can't see the target, but sometimes I kind of enjoy it a little more because it makes things a little like more difficult for everyone else too. And I don't mind imagining where the 12 is sometimes, so it doesn't bother me as much.
Okay, so when you can't see the 12, are you going off of the body line? Are you picking like a shadow that you can see? What's your there?
On something like a Russian boar, black bear, wild boar, and if I have no indication of anything on the target, no branch slightly over that I can aim off of, I definitely do body line shots. I'll spot it through my binoculars, and then I'll say, okay, it needs to be about here, and I'll put it there. It might not be a great 10, it might be a 12, but I do all the body line shots on ones I absolutely have no markings on. If it's something I have a little shadow or a shot at hole, I will aim off of it or on it any day. If I can have some sort of reference.
Okay, and when you're taking a body line shot, are you aiming center 10 on those? Or are you trying to catch a 12 still?
I usually go center 10 slightly low if I feel confident. If I feel confident, I'll kind of push it towards a lower 12. Otherwise, I'll try to go solid 10.
Okay. Do you exclusively shoot the lower 12?
No,
How's your 12 strategy?
no. When I got into ASA in like 2022 is when I started shooting them in Arkansas locally. And I used to shoot almost exclusively upper. I was just like crazy about ASA. But after taking a break and then actually getting into the real ASA shoots, I was careful and I liked to shoot. I liked having my marks a little hot and then I would aim on the lower 12 and I would be safe because it might be a little tall, but I wouldn't be risking it into the 8. But now that I've gotten really, really comfortable, I love the upper 12s because they're usually a little less sought after and you might have a clearer shot. But I would say if I have a clearer shot on lower, I'll go for it any day. But I do have a preference for uppers when they're more open.
Okay. And how do other arrows come into play when you're trying to sneak one in? Like I know during the team shoot, those 12s can get pretty crowded.
Yes.
How are you sneaking arrows in there?
Well, let's say you have a group of people in the lower 12 and all their arrows are in the bottom. I'll put it right there with them, maybe give it a click or two, aim on, but then give it some clicks. So I feel it's going to go on top of the arrows. If their group of arrows is in the IBO and top of the lower 12, I think I would just avoid the situation altogether, especially if they're crowding the top of the lower. I probably wouldn't go for that unless I absolutely had to. And then I'd aim on their arrows and hope I got in between them.
Okay. And how often do glance outs happen? I mean, I'm trying to, in that situation, like at that point, I'd be scared of a glance out. How often do you actually get those?
I would say I've had like around like 1 to 3 you could get a day. And someone might hit your kick out bushing and then it doesn't go far, or it might go out into the 8, maybe even the 5. but you usually have at least one a day, depending on the level of shooters you're shooting with, how consistent those groups amongst everyone are.
Okay. And then you said the lowers are typically more crowded.
Yes.
Is that in ASA are peer grouped, right? So you're with other women pro? Is that
Yes, I'm with people in my division. On day one, you're randomly sorted, and then day two, you are peer grouped.
okay, but you're always with people in your division.
That's
So,
correct.
okay. So that'd be pretty tough. I know my divisions are probably not as crowded as yours, I'd say.
I don't know. You'd have to check.
I don't know. I think that sneaking arrows in can be tricky. I'm kind of, I don't know. I don't know if I'm not good at it or I'm just kind of scared of it, but
Yeah, you got to be confident. If you're confident in your shots that day, I'm like, if I put it here, it's going there. And then it's like, well, can I get away with it? Can I put it on top of the group of the arrows and catch the 12? Is that group loose enough I can sneak one in there? It's like how comfortable are you feeling today? How much are you willing to risk?
okay. So it's really situational, I guess.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
so binoculars I know are big for ASA, and I've talked about this with a few people. And what my strategy was last couple years for ASA when it comes to binocs, I've tried I think three different pairs, like 8 by 32s, 10 by 42s, and then 12 by 52, 12 by 50, something like that. So three different sizes, kind of small, medium, big. And I actually landed for 3D on the small binocs. And the reason why I went with those is because they were not necessarily darker, but I just couldn't quite see as well. And it was very similar to what I saw when I drew the bow back and was looking through my peep in the scope. And so that's why I kind of edge towards those smaller binocs was because it matched my sight picture, even though I couldn't see lines as well as I could with like the 12 by 50s.
That
Um,
that makes sense.
what do you like to do with binocs?
I believe mine are a 12 by or a 15 by. I shoot the Vortex binoculars. And I think mine would be the opposite. I like to be able to know exactly where everything is, and then it's just taking practice to know about how much I need to aim off of something to hit it when I'm looking through my scope. But
Okay.
I like to be able to know the details. I like to be able to see what I'm aiming at. And then I can be, fumbling around in the dark trying to figure out where the 12 is through my scope.
Okay. So I know I found myself when I was using the bigger binocs, I found myself like drawing back, finding out that I can't see what I could see through my lenses, and then um
Yeah.
like letting the shot down. Okay, I need to come up with a different plan here. Does that ever happen with you?
Oh yeah. Sometimes if I'm like in the beginning, I'm not worn out or anything, I'll grab my thumb peg on my release and I'll look. And if I can kind of see what I needed to be aiming at, I could go back into the shot. Otherwise, if it's gone, I'll let down and respot.
Okay. And so you hinge, is that what you're shooting?
Yes.
Okay, so you're kind of like grabbing it and then like looking at the target with your bare eye, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay, and then like re-anchoring and then going through with your shot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I've not heard that, but that could be a good way to do it. Yeah, that's definitely interesting. So, I think for me, like the biggest thing for 3D was I shot a lot of it here. I think it was, let's see, summer of 24, shooting a ton of like local ASAs. And like, I really got good, I think, at determining, okay, this shot I'm going to shoot at the upper, next one I'm going to be at the lower. So I kind of had, I was really in my groove on picking the upper lower, like what I preferred. I never really did have a preference for upper and lower. I always just kind of picked whatever was most visible, whatever was closest to that, the black dot on the hyena or whatever that you can see the best.
Right.
And I was always just back and forth, whatever was easiest for me. I never had a preference. And then I was playing a lot of the, aim at the upper and then take off a little bit of yardage. So you're sighted in to hit the bottom of the 12, and then that way I'm never really missing out into the 8.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Are you ever clicking your sight like that, giving a little bit of adjustment from behind your pin?
All the time. And even if I get on the range and my marks are off, if they're like hitting a little high or low, that'll affect how I shoot for the rest of the day. Like if I'm hitting a little high, I might go for most of the lowers the whole day because I'm confident that I can put it in the lower and I'm not going to be worrying about dropping it out in the 8 most of the time. And vice versa for the upper. And even then, I might give it clicks, even though I'm already hitting off a little bit. I might still give it some clicks and bring it down. Like at Coleman, when I shot that round, I got to the range in my marks. Like I had to redo my marks at Coleman before my first round, and I think I was like 5 yards off or something. And I had to mess with my sight bar, and I brought it in to get my marks to hit, like last minute. And I shot that way, and I was still a yard high on everything. So I was giving it adjustments the whole round.
Really? Okay. So I've kind of been in that same situation before. When you're, I guess they call it like your sight tape indicator. When it is off and you're in the middle of a round shooting, and for whatever reason you start hitting left or up or down or whatever, or maybe it's the lighting that's changing your impact a little bit or how you're seeing things. Are you ever moving that indicator, or are you just giving it clicks?
I would usually give it clicks, and I don't. I have my sight tape on there as like an emergency check. I usually print out sight marks, and I have it tied to my quiver, so I'll check that after I range each target. And then if I'm like double checking and I don't have time to re-range and recheck the number, I'll flip my bow over and I'll look. I'm like, okay, is that around where it's supposed to be? If it is, we're good to go. So yeah, if I'm
Okay.
hitting off, I'll give it a few clicks and adjust that way instead of messing with the indicator.
Okay, yeah, that's probably a better way to do it. I never thought to run a double setup like that, but that makes a lot more sense. I've always run I'll print off a tape from like Archer's Advantage, or I get Precision Cut, I think is the latest and greatest, and then kind of go off of that. And I've never, well, actually my old site, it was terrible for backlash. I won't say the brand, but it was a high dollar nice site, and it was like backlash that I could not get rid of. It happened after about a year and a half of shooting it is when I started getting it. So I couldn't use like the actual marks on the knob to
Yeah,
print out, marks like you're talking about. Then I switched to now I shoot in Excel, and there's no backlash in that one.
right.
So this 3D season I'm definitely going to be using some marks on that.
And even with the Excel sites, if you're doing a lot of sliding and then suddenly it's off a little bit, it's really easy to like move that and it's like perfect. See, that's really easy to mess with if it does ever get off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I do like I think it's the newest Excel has the micro adjust indicator. I know my old site, it was like I was always moving, putting on new site tapes and stuff when I'm switching from TAC to 3D to target to, all these things. I was always changing site tapes and moving stuff. And like the indicator was always such a pain to get absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
When you're running solely off of that, like you have to get it really close. Um, and I think the micro adjust helps
Yeah,
in that
it's been
indicator.
incredible. It's been incredible.
Yeah, that's one thing. Like I kind of like simplicity in a lot of my setup. Hoyts I think are a more simple bow. There's less screws, less to go wrong. And but with my sight, I'm kind of quite the opposite. I like the bells and whistles.
Oh yeah. It's especially for your marks and stuff and where you're aiming, you want that crazy adjustability to be able to do it exactly when you need to do it, exactly how you need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what about your sight setup for 3D? Like pin, lens, what are your up there?
Well, I'm using a specialty Pete. I have a True Ball Excel sight bar and I'm shooting an ultra view scope. And I have a doublet lens in there and it's a drilled lens. So I'll have a 0.19 fiber in there and I'll have it speared through a dot sometimes for
Speared through
actually, yeah, like
speared
your
through dot.
fibers goes through a dot. Especially for redding something like that, I like to have that. Otherwise, I just have a fiber, just straight. Maybe it's about 3/4 inch long, and I'll score it so it stays in the lens. And so I just have a little tiny piece of fiber in the lens.
Okay. Yeah. So with the fiber with the dot, explain that to me. Spearing it through.
Well, the reasoning behind, especially for I use it almost all the time for field and redding, is on a lighter target, you have the dark dot. And for dark targets, you have the fiber and you can turn up your light and you can see it better. When I started getting into 3D, I had a hard time seeing my fiber on dark targets and stuff like that and light targets. So I would have that dot and it made things a lot easier so I could switch that up. and I always had something to aim with.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I actually did something similar to that for shooting the 12 at Lancaster a couple years ago. I
Yeah.
had a just like an up pin with a like a small dot behind it, and the dot was for aiming at the 11, and then the pin was for aiming at the 12.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes sense. So, and I think that helps with. I've heard it helps with starburst a little bit, and starburst I mean like the fuzzy pin you get when it's really
Yeah,
bright.
I think so. I've also found that I get more of it when my light's low. Like if I don't have a lot of light on my scope at the moment, it usually wants to disappear and do that.
Okay. And what about like pin color? Have you found you like a certain color there?
I use green. I didn't realize it till around the end of last season, but I see a lot of people using blue, but I've always stuck with the green fiber. I like it and that's what I use.
Really? Okay. Do you find that it works better on certain targets and not as good on others?
Not particularly, except if you don't have a good light and your light's not at a good angle in your scope, it can get kind of hard to see on especially bright targets.
Okay, it's
Or
like
like
the
when you're out in the sun and it's like shining down really hard on you. So, really bright conditions, sometimes you might want to make sure your scope's covering that fiber really well and you have really strong light on it. Otherwise, especially for ASA in the trees, I haven't had much issues with that.
okay. And how about sight light?
I have the ultra view light on there, and I had my dad drill a hole in the scope, and I have an Elvis track light on it.
Okay, so do both of them work, or how do you run that?
Well, originally we got into ultra view because it just had everything rolled in one, and I was having trouble with another satellite brand. And, it just became really convenient, and we ended up shooting ultra view for a long time, and I still like their scopes. And, then I was just getting to the point where the light just really wasn't bright enough, and my batteries were dying all the time because I was shooting so much. And then I got the Elvis tack light, and it just lit everything up. And so I usually keep that ultra view light, the batteries fresh in there as like a backup if something really happens. But I haven't had the issue because Elvis Shack's battery lasts so long. So I think it's because I like the size, the scope, but I really like the Elvis Tack light, so I stick with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's good to hear. I know that it has become pretty popular. That's the one that turns on when you pick the bow up, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty slick. I think the only sight light that I've ever used has been a LP. I'm sure you've seen those. I mean, it works good for me. It gets as bright as I need, and I think it's pretty reliable. It's got batteries, so you're not recharging, I guess. But yeah, I think that the Elvish Tax definitely got a good deal going on there with their stuff.
Yes, and also, at least with mine with drilled, I've noticed that it makes a big difference on my fiber depending on where the light angle's coming from, and I've noticed that where my Elvis Shack light is positioned in my scope, it lights up the fiber a whole lot more too.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's important. I heard you say 19 thousandths fiber. Is that what you like?
Yes,
I've always run a 10, and I actually don't know if I've even tried a 19 now that I think about it. Have you ever compared that to a 10?
I don't think so.
Have
I
you?
think I've had 10s on some of my old hunting setups, but I think some of my drilled lenses just were 19 and it's just what I've always used. I've tried a 29 once, but I didn't quite like it as much because I couldn't see everything around what I was aiming at as well.
Okay, and how big does a 19 thousandths pin look on a 12 ring at 50 yards? Is it covering or filling the whole 12 ring?
Yeah, but also when I put that piece of fiber in there, I burn the end of it so it's a little bigger. So it's a smaller fiber, but it's almost the size. So it does cover the 12 at 50 yards.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And how do you like to, I guess, aim at a 12? I've heard of a lot of people like my dad, for example, he hunts with, I think it's a 7-pin sight and they come from the side. And when he's, hunting with sight, if you look at my eye right now in the video, like if you're aiming at my eye, his pin would be right here, just off to the side of it.
Yes.
Um, and then like me with an up pin, I try to cover what I'm aiming at.
Yeah, it's about whether you're comfortable not seeing exactly what you're aiming at.
What do you
Last year
like?
Last year when I got into ASA, especially with my indoor setup, I like to, well, I said I like to have more control over my setup. I like to pull it up into the dot. So I'm more comfortable with it being just below and then putting more pressure and pulling it up into the 12. So I liked, if I were to say, I don't like being directly on it all the time unless I'm like really, really confident this is going exactly where I want it. On those close ones, though, I do like to pull it up in there.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that makes good sense. So, Foley, this week, what's your last minute preps? Are you changing anything on your setup? Are you just repping out lots of arrows? Like what's the week before look like for you?
Well, right now, I did procrastinate a little bit and I switched my blade to the Hamsky Trinity again. Last year, I shot 4 Fletch arrows and I ended up not switching that. So I was like, well, I could kind of shoot the blade. I had to shoot the standard. And I've tried like the Pro Tour blade on 23s and 25s, but I just have enough inconsistency that it wasn't working. And I noticed in the wind, sometimes my fletchings would couch the blade, and then when I didn't have wind, they wouldn't. So I was just like, I don't need this in my life. I'm switching back to a drop away for now until I can get some 3 Fletch 20.
Yeah, four fletch. I've never even thought of that, but yeah, four fletch could be an issue on a blade rest.
Yeah, my indoor 27s were 4 fletched, and then last minute I scraped half of them off, and I have a 3 Fletch. I have 6 3 Fletch and 6 4 Fletch indoor arrows.
So, why do you like four fletch? Why do you like running that?
I thought that the 4 Fletch had a little more
Yes.
control over the arrow, and I also think they look really cool, so I shoot them. But if I
Yeah.
want to shoot a blade with my Concept X so I can switch out arrow setups, I need to get my other 25s. I need to build another set that have 3 Fletch, so I have the option to switch.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think on the four fletch, my thought process behind that is that if you look at like a rocket ship, you know, the fins on a rocket ship, and I don't know the technical term, but the fins on a rocket ship are all the way at the bottom of the ship, right, when it's going up, all the way
Mhm.
towards the back. And the idea behind that is to get um, I think it's called the center of drag on the object. I'm not sure if I'm using the right words here, but basically, you want that as far back behind the center of mass on that object as possible for the most amount of stability. So when you've got like 4 3-inch vanes instead of 3 4-inch vanes, you might have the same amount of surface area, or you might have the same amount of drag there, but the 3-inch vanes are going to be situated a little bit farther back on the shaft, and so I'm thinking it's got a little bit more steering power. But
Mhm.
then there's the 3 versus 4 fletch debate. That's kind of a debate, I guess. But I
Yeah.
think I could go either way. I think I've always shot 3 fletch though. I've yet to try 4 fletch, but I'm sure it would work just fine. And then like you're talking about with the blade, I've never been able to bring myself to shoot a blade just because like you're saying, it's trying to get vane clearance and like, in the wind, out of the wind. I've always just gone the drop away route and called it good.
Yeah, I've shot the Hamsky dropaways for years, and last year my dad's like, "Ooh, I'm shooting a blade and I can switch my arrow setup so quickly," and he got me into trying it this past fall, and I really thought it would work, but I was like, "No, we're gonna switch this, and we're gonna figure out getting a 3 Fletch setup with the blade on our own time, not rushing it right before Foley." And I tried to scrape one arrow, and those fletchings were not coming off. And I'm like, all right, switch it to the blade. You know what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, and believe it or not, I really don't listen to that many podcasts, but I did listen to one the other day. It's the newer one with Louis Price and Archery Roundtable, and they
Yeah,
were talking
I've
about
seen some of those. Yeah.
yeah, they were talking about tuning in the one that I listened to, and I remember one segment they were talking about the difference between tuning a blade rest versus a drop away, and how I think they said that you want to, like if you're paper tuning, for example, you want to paper tune it with knock high just a little bit when you're shooting a blade, just to kind of eliminate any fletching clearance, have the tail of that arrow slightly higher off the rest.
Yeah.
And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, man, I don't know if I really want to be tuning my arrow differently just to avoid vane contact when I can just shoot a drop away.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. I will say the one thing you have to be careful about with the drop away, if they're limb driven, So you definitely should mark where that string is tied, because I've noticed with some grips that they tend to slide, and that affects how long your arrow's sitting on the rest during your shot. I learned that the hard way. It's definitely something to remember. Otherwise, I really do like the drop away rests.
Yeah, and I've got a top secret way of adjusting that too that I'll tell you once we're done talking here, and some people listening might know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I think that that's very important, making sure that nothing moves. But and actually, I've always gone the cable driven route, which I know that's kind of like the old fashioned way of doing it, but
I've never done it. Never
yeah,
done it.
I've had good results. But yeah, so fully this week, um, what's your schedule look like for the weekend? Are you driving out for the team shoot, coming in a little bit late?
Well, I will be traveling with my friend, and we're going to leave Tuesday morning, and we're going to drive there. And we'll get there late Tuesday, early Wednesday. And I don't believe I'll be shooting the team shoot just because I'm just out there so long and I can get so many more arrows when I'm shooting on the practice range and I can change something and I don't feel guilty about leaving people if I have to leave. Because if I'm gonna be in the team shoot, I'm gonna shoot the whole thing. But if I feel like I need to be tuning right now, I don't want to do that to your bailmates because you're supposed to be there. So I usually don't if I feel like I might be having to work on something before my rounds.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think that I would leave a team shoot either. I mean, when I get to a shoot, I try to be my buddy Travis says tailgate ready. I try to be tailgate ready. So when I show up to shoot, I kind of plan for not having any practice, and then if I do get practice, even if like my bow isn't shooting that great, like it's not holding steady, I try not to move stuff just because I don't know, just because I think it could be the pressure. I don't know, but you say you like to do a little bit of tuning on the practice range?
Yeah. If you gotta do it, you gotta do it to get your bow right before your shoot.
What kind of tuning do you do?
Well, you might need to mess with your holding weight in some emergency. Hey, what if you need to put a twist in your string? What if you feel like it's a little long? Stuff like that. I've, in the past, when I haven't had time to mess with my string, if I wanted to put like a tiny bit in there, I use electrical tape and I'll wrap it on the top of my grip where I have the front of my hand on the riser. And that'll make things a little shorter in an emergency if I need to. Stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's a great tip. I'll definitely use that. I know the Hoyt grips are adjustable to the 8th inch now, which I like
Hmm.
to make 16th inch adjustments sometimes. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's something good to think about. So, fully this weekend heading into it, what day do you shoot?
I shoot Friday in the morning and then I shoot Saturday. So Friday, I think it's 9 a.m. and then Saturday is like 7 a.m.
Okay,
if my
first
memory
day.
serves me right.
Okay, so first day is just everybody like randomized in your division, and then second day peer grouped, right?
Yes.
And they've got the scoreboard running the whole time, if I'm thinking right. Okay, so we'll be able to
Hmm.
watch that.
Yeah, they do. They update it every 5 ends.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, they update it
Well,
every 5 ends.
I'll be watching. And shoot down is that Sunday?
Shoot down is like Saturday. It's Saturday afternoon and usually start at 4:30.
Saturday afternoon. Okay, and then I know all that's on be broadcasted, and a lot of times they'll even put that on like the outdoor channel, I think. Um,
Yeah, it's like the Sportsman's Channel or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So awesome. Well, the one of the majors of archery, what is as people call it. I wish you good luck going into this weekend. I look forward to seeing you on the leaderboard and in the shoot down. And I appreciate all the help. I mean, this is some good stuff to think about, from site setups, transferring indoor to 3D, changing all the setup stuff like that. Annabelle, I appreciate your
Yeah.
time. What is a good way for people to contact you if they've got questions?
I would say through Instagram. That's usually where I put up most of my content. Anything on Facebook, I might do on my dad's account. So definitely Instagram is where I'll be at.
Instagram. Perfect. Well, find Annabelle on Instagram. I appreciate your time coming on the podcast, and good luck this weekend. We will see you on the next episode.
All right. Thank you, Mason.